Hi everyone, thanks for the nice introduction. My name is Anna-Marie and I'm going to be presenting our SoK paper about sample size estimation and developer-centered usable security on behalf of my co-authors Christian Tiefenau and Matthew Smith. And don't worry, I'm not going to read all those test names out loud again, but our paper focuses only on hypothesis tests with one categorical independent variable with two groups. And while we are aware that complex scenarios and study designs merit complex power analysis procedures, we just had to start somewhere, so we decided to start more simple. So, power analysis. Statistical power is the probability of detecting an effect if a true effect exists. And using a priori power analysis, we can calculate how many participants we need to detect an effect of a certain size and reach a certain power. And this is especially important because underpowered studies as well as overpowered studies are actually a waste of resources, our researcher time, our participants' time. And this is even more important in developer-centered usable security because in that field there's only a limited number of available participants. These participants are busy professionals, so they have time limitations, and they're also highly paid in their work life, so that makes them costly to recruit. So, what's the status quo in the field? Do we have the power? Well, to find this out, we did a meta-analysis of power to detect effects of a given size, using the reported participant number. Note that this is not post-hoc power analysis because we didn't use the achieved effect size in the studies we looked at, but rather use standard criteria for small, medium, and large size effect. And I'm really sorry to say, no, we don't currently have the power, at least for small and medium effects. And as you can see here at the top of the graph, even the study that had the most power to detect these small effects still had less than 50% of power. So this is basically a coin flip of whether you can find an existing small effect or not. So in general, we're probably missing a lot of small and medium effects. And no wonder, because power analysis, so checking whether you have the power before you do a study, is just not that common in our field. And in 2020 and 2021, only about 11% of quantitative papers actually used a priori power analysis. So what can we do about it? Well, we can conduct power analysis. And power analysis makes use of the fact that in null hypothesis statistical testing, there are 4 interrelated properties of a statistical hypothesis test. And if you have 3 of those, you can then calculate the 4th. So we're usually interested in sample size, so that's one of them. Then I've talked quite a bit about power, that's the second. Then there's the alpha error level, which is basically how many false positives are you willing to accept in your study. And finally, there's the effect size, which is how large is the difference between the 2 groups in the test that we focus on, where we're always comparing 2 groups. Or in a more general way, you're looking at the strength of the relationship between your independent and dependent variables, so between your predictor and your outcome. There's, of course, different types of power analysis depending on which of these 4 characteristics you're interested in, but usually what we're doing is a priori power analysis. So we're interested in calculating the sample size we need before our study. And then we, of course, need the other 3 characteristics. So for power and for the alpha error level, that's simple enough because there's conventions of what is considered acceptable. And for power, this is 80% of power, and the alpha error level is generally put at 5%, so 0.05. And well, this can be discussed. If we just keep to these levels, we have it easier for the power analysis. And the problems really start with the effect size because there are different effect sizes necessary for power analyses for different tests. And for some tests, depending on what exactly you're looking at, there might even be multiple different effect sizes used in reporting when you're reporting these tests and doing them. So these are just the formal difficulties. Of course, you're interested in the effect size you're expecting to detect, and you want to know how many participants you need to do that. So if you're a researcher, you have a research question, your question when you're trying to do power analysis will be, what effect size should I use? And there are several different ways you can go about that. The probably most easy one would be to just use guidelines. And you've seen these guidelines in effect in the graph at the beginning of my talk. There are just set borders for what constitutes a large, medium, or small effect. But while they're easy to apply, they're not necessarily meaningful in your concrete context of research. So what you can do instead is do literature research and try to find similar work and look at what sort of effects they detected and sort of take that and use that as a baseline for your judgment. However, if we're in a novel field and developer-centered usable security is still relatively young, similar enough work may just not exist or otherwise be hard to find. So what you can also do is do a pilot study, then you know it's close enough to your own work, but that also comes with a high cost because you already need to recruit your developers for your pilot study. So another option is to sort of think of what effect is large enough for you, just large enough that it's actually important in practice. And that involves you as a researcher making a sort of trade-off between the benefit that if this effect exists would happen and the resources needed to implement the change to reach that effect. And then sort of that can encompass literature research and pilot study and so on as a baseline. So what we tried to do in our work was we wanted to make finding similar studies and reasoning about effect sizes easier for us as a community. And we collected literature from 6 different conferences, and we ended up with 54 papers, which we included, and they encompass 64 studies and quite a lot of hypothesis tests and variables. And we then used this information and developed a data structure for this information and focused on the information needed to conduct power analysis, so a lot of effect sizes in our database. So what can you do with this information? Our student Ahmed Asaf is currently developing a website with us for you to access this information in an easier way, and you can try out the current status of the website by scanning the QR code right now, and we also have the link in our paper. And if you have any feedback on that, there's also a feedback survey on the About page. So in the rest of the talk, I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough of the current state. So the main access point is, of course, the search interface. And since if we're interested in looking for people who've done similar studies, the most important part is really looking at variables involved in the test. And if you have already a very concrete idea of which variables you're interested in, you can use the variable field to sort of enter that in. But if you just have a broad idea of where you're going, we also categorized all the variables in our sample into 13 different categories. So something broad like usability, security, functionality, or study-related variables. And you can use the category interface. And additional search possibilities also include participant types, test types, and the data collection method in the study. And then if you find results, you'll get something like this, where again, variables are at the center of the results, and you get some more information on how variables were measured. And also the effect size is rather small at the bottom right here. And what might be interesting is that there is a test-specific effect size. So in one case, in this case where we're looking at a Fisher's exact test, there is an odds ratio here, but we also converted this odds ratio to a Cohen's d because in past research we found that researchers do tend to be a little more familiar with that, so just so you can gauge the effect size better. And then based on this, if you have a result that fits you perfectly, yay, you can use that sort of as a basis for what effect size you will be expecting. But if you have multiple results, you can also sort of average over these to get an idea of the ballpark of effect size you're expecting. Of course, it may be the case that you just don't get a result. And you can still use our paper where we also have this graph, which shows just overall the different categories of dependent variables, which sort of effect size appeared in the literature that we looked at. And as you can see here, in our sample effects, median effects were mostly in the small and medium range of effect size. And if you're interested in looking like more the influence of independent variables, you can also download the SQLite file of the complete database from our website to check your specifications by yourself. Of course, a lot of you are not working with developers. I mean, we have one session on developer participants and so on. So we are actually working on extending this work to end user studies. And we're open for collaboration on this if you're interested. So just get in contact with me. So that hopefully by the end of all this, we'll be able to say by the power of PowerDB, I have the power to detect this effect. So I'm not quite done yet, sorry. I've talked about power and the size of effect quite a bit. And I'm actually doing more research on this and trying to find out what you as researchers think about effect sizes. So I'd be really grateful if you took part in my roughly 5-minute survey. The QR code is right here. I also posted the link in Slack, and there are some flyers around which my colleagues will be distributing at the end of the session. I'm also conducting interviews, so if you want to talk to me directly and share your insight of effect sizes, just walk up to me. I'd love to chat, and I'm happy to take any questions now. Thank you.